think ultimately I'm grieved at the lack of art. I'm grieved at the lack of art because when you think art, I simultaneously think art is synonymous to authenticity. And I just miss when people would do things because it was innate. I feel like that's when we got the best art. That's when we got truth. And today it's really just people doing things because they can. You know what I mean? Like creators and people being online, like people just do stuff because they can. And I absolutely think you should exercise your free will. But I think the problem with that comes when you start branding yourself as a truth teller, or when you start branding yourself as someone who's authentic. And I think people can no longer tell the difference, and when you start garnering influence, it's pretty bad. And I just miss that. I just miss when writers and people would write because they had something to say. Like you wrote, like I don't want to say you wrote, but like people write because they have something to say. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's what makes the writer the writer. You know what I mean? And I just miss that. I miss that. I miss when a photo would capture 1,000 words. You know what I mean? Not this like super like, this tailored, edited, over edited approach to photography that we have today, where people are trying to tell you what the image, communicates, when you can still see beyond all of it. If you are someone who has a bit of an artistic eye, you can still see the person in the image, regardless of how they try to, create all these filters and craft themselves, right? But I miss that. I miss when, we got the truth and we didn't get what other people wanted us to get. You know what I mean? Like I miss the art of things. I miss the authenticity of things. I just miss that. I miss when people did what they did because it was just who they are, and they just couldn't live. I don't want to say live, that's a bit of extreme, but like, I feel like they just couldn't exist without doing what it is that they love. Like, they would do it because they have no choice but to do it. You know what I mean? Because it is the thing that connects them, and it is the thing that it's just them. It's just who they are as a person. I miss that before the consistency warriors, before people just started doing things because they can and they garner influence, and it just kind of dilutes this space. And I do believe that our inability to engage with art, our inability to create art mindfully, is what leads to the consumerism, because it's really just about aesthetics. And when I say consumerism, I mean, you'll go to an art gallery and you're just there to consume the space, right? You just want to, take pictures, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, of course, there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm just more so saying, like, I think that we do things because we can. You know what I mean? We buy the clothes because we can, not because it's a sense of expression. We're wearing the outfit because it's trendy, not because this is who we are and this is how we want to show up and communicate to the world about our sense of style. Like doing things so mindlessly, like it's not just Instagram scrolling, like just living, right? Existing so mindlessly is so normalized today that I feel like persons of consciousness are really, where y'all at? Where we at? I don't even know. Where are we? Where are we? I don't even know. You know what I mean? Like, are we okay? Are y'all okay? Because I feel like we're not okay, but I just miss being able to engage with art thoughtfully. And like, I love when I do find like cultural critics, and I'm going to be honest with you, even as someone who doesn't have certain credentials, I think what I admire is not necessarily a person's accomplishments and that they went to this, prestigious film school or whatever the case may be. I think what I acknowledge is what I admire is people who've put in the work in their field of study. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's the marker of success for me personally. Like, I'm not interested in people who, can hire editors or make their videos, like, you know what I mean? Incredibly tailored. And I think I did ask you guys that in the community post, like, hey, should I, because my videos and my content is not the best quality. You know what I mean? It's not. And I was like, should I invest in this? And some people said no, and some people said yes. And I feel like today we're so focused on the thumbnail, on the pop-ups, that like the videos don't really have any substance. Like you'll see somebody take a very big topic, something that's not even, I don't want to say controversial, but something that holds a lot of depth and a lot of weight and requires quite a bit of research, extensive research to really come out and share like an opinion about it. And it's like you'll watch the 19 minute video, or you'll watch it, and it's just like there's no research here. They haven't done enough research. And I think in part it's because when you create content, especially in the space of like being a video essayist, you have to be consistent. And I think that's what I'm saying about people who do things because they can. The consistency warriors, they have ruined art because it's like push instead of like, hey, let's really sit with something. You know what I mean? Let's really sit with something. Let's, engage with something in a way. Let's actually build this project, but when everybody's kind of rushing to be monetized, which is rightfully so. I do not shame you. I'm not shaming you, but it's just more so like you lose the art of that. And I think for me, seeing that this is something that I never thought would happen in the space of like readership, writing, penmanship, the space of like intellectualism, so to speak. I never thought that this would be the next space that capitalism drained. You know what I mean? And you could say, well, obviously, yeah, because of the tabloids, but I'm thinking no. You know what I mean? Because I just felt like within the space of like being readers and writers, it was such a small little like narrow, you know what I mean? Like you couldn't really just enter this space unless you really love what it is that you do, but people absolutely can today. You know what I mean? They can just craft a script and they can just come online, because right now the hottest thing is being intelligence, right? We love coming online in people's comment sections, calling people dumb, you know what I mean? Telling people that they need, like they have mental issues because they said something wrong, or because, you know what I mean? Like we love weaponizing intelligence today. It's the last little grappling thing that we can kind of grab hold to, right? Because it's like we've done it, we've ravaged through every other aspect of society, you know what I mean? Like, and so now it's like we have to come for the brain. We have to come for academia, because that's the one space where I feel like people want the depth, they want the intelligence, but they're not really willing to do the work. You know what I mean? People don't want to go to school anymore. People aren't willing to kind of sit and read like a collection of things. You know what I mean? It's more so like, well, I read one book and this is what I think. This is what I know. This is what it is. Instead of being like, well, let's actually sit with all the books on this particular subject, not just from this one specific author, but let's also sit with the books from the other authors who've critiqued this person's work, or who, you know what I mean? Like, and I feel like you just no longer have people who are really engaging with things in a thoughtful way because they enjoy it, but because they can, and because it's popular, and because that's the one thing that people want. People want to feel like they're intelligent. And obviously we all do, we all want to, but I'm talking about in the sense of like greed and consumerism, right? Not in the sense of like people want to be acknowledged for who they are, or what they've been long studying, right? I already talked about how it's very lonely for a lot of Black academics. You know what I mean? I talked about this probably last year. Go back down the podcast. I had this podcast since 2021. Or 2020. I think I had this podcast since 2020. But go back down those episodes and look at where I talked about the Black nerd. You know what I mean? And now here we are, fast forward, and it's like, yeah, you could say from an economic standpoint, this is our time to shine, right? We should get in on this. And absolutely, right? I got the YouTube channel. I'm not above it. But at the same time, I just think that, I just feel like when we infiltrate in spaces because of a trend, we erase all the history. It's kind of like cultural appropriation. You know what I mean? Like we'll enter into certain spaces and it's like, instead of being someone who really loves art, now you just want to consume art. You just want to have this stuff because you just want to look cool, versus even, understanding the artist and why they created what they created. And hey, does that piece resonate with you spiritually? Because art is spiritual. You know what I mean? Like we don't engage with stuff from the conscious standpoint. And it's not even a matter of being deep. Yeah, I just feel like we want to present as though we're intelligent, but we're intellectually lazy. We're intellectually lazy, but we want to present as intelligent. You know what I mean? So that's the thing that concerns me. It's like you can craft a script, you can craft your content in a certain way, and you can edit and you can be all these things. And yes, sometimes the content is good, but a lot of times people are just on there sharing opinions. There's really no insight, no depth, no substance to this big thumbnail, you know what I mean, this very big topic that they put up on this YouTube channel, and it's incredibly disappointing because where is the substance? For something like that, that requires a considerable amount of research, not just a couple talking points. You know what I mean? And I also think we've lost that too, because nobody wants to sit and listen to you talk for 2 hours. People will, but I feel like on average, people, with sales, if you want to kind of, monetize your content, people want something quick and digestible. Obviously, yes, you want to be, don't just, but I feel like, I just feel like we just lost the art of that. And I think as someone who's been, who's a writer who just does it because I love it. And, I think I'm a little grieved. I was on Substack and I talked about this. I said, wow, I don't think Substack is a space for me. I miss the days where people will write just to write. Substack has become a space where influencers just come to infiltrate, and it's like another platform that I feel like is not being oversaturated, because I think that word is overused, but I feel like it's just another platform where honestly people are just coming to infiltrate, and people are just coming to monetize and get you to sell something. Like, it's become nothing more than just a sales funnel versus like a platform for writers to really tell their stories and voice their opinions. And I feel like that's the grief in that. And I just think we're losing that all across the board. Medium is the same way, right? Medium kind of started to introduce AI, and you had the rise of a lot of these like articles that were selling, and they were written by AI, and Chat GPT. So I don't know. I just think that this is like the biggest thing. And we start talking about like the lack of joy that we have in our lives. It's because we just mindlessly consume. And I'm not using consumerism in the sense of buying bags and lip gloss and blah, 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 or just sitting on social media scrolling. I'm talking about just in our lives. You know what I mean? We don't observe anything. I talked about this in the last episode, just how we should be observers of ideas, right? Instead we consume ideas. We make it our identity. That's why you have people who come online and they want to kind of present themselves as these pseudo intellectuals, but they don't really provide any substance. They just have really good content. They can, create some really cool content videography and craft it in that way. But when you really sit at the core of it, there's really nothing there. There's really nothing that they're saying. There's really nothing, to really hold on to. And so I just think that, we're just living in a day and time where, you start talking about happiness, and that's why it's lost on us. You know what I mean? And what would be one place where you could go to kind of connect with people who have these shared values and interests, it's no longer a thing. It's no longer a thing. Why? Because most people are in this space because they can be in this space, and they're just infiltrating, they're masquerading, they're consuming the space instead of actually living it. And that was the other premise that I made in the last video. People are the biggest hypocrites today, and that's actually what comes with a platform, right? Typically what comes with a platform is you being a hypocrite. You have to come online, you'll present yourself as one way, and you'll be this one way, but in real life, you're not like that. And that's kind of the paradox of celebrity. And that's what we've all become, little celebrities. So y'all sit with that, because I'm proud of this episode. Peace.